Howdy y'all. On the last episode we got 4G Lefty over here on the lift so we can get it lifted up, get the bottom of this cleaned up, and we're getting close to putting some paint on it. Dad's putting some covers on the top of the transmission and rear end so that we don't get any overspray in there, and I need to get those adjusters free on the bottom of this carcass for the brakes. We are out here on the top cover for Lefty's carcass, and it needs to get cleaned up. It got marooned out here off the concrete, so we somehow have to figure out a way to get it back on the concrete. Thanks, Dad. And I was able to find actually a new old stock bushing for that clutch, a 4F1590, fairly decent price on eBay. But I also found these from bronzebushings.com, and we'll turn those out to make them work. And those will go in here where the main clutch was, and those were substantially worn out, completely egged out. So that's all getting rebuilt, and we'll go back to working on the carcass inside. Upon our inspection and cleaning, we've decided that we're going to pull this off. Dad pulled the brakes off of here so we can get a good paint job and get this cleaned up. Those bushings in there aren't bad. We're going to leave them alone. But we're going to pull this out and put a new gasket in here. I hate to say it, but we might need to get into your transmission.
Why?
To get this
from the other side.
Yeah, from the top and push it out. So in hindsight, we decided not to take this gear train out of here, but I did pull the bolts out. We're going to clean them up. I'm probably going to chase the threads, or at least blow them out good. Take some solvent, clean this up. There's a substantial groove here that was just packed full of dirt. I'll get that cleaned up. I've got new lock washers to put in there. Every one we pulled out of here was broke, and I'm going to kind of take my tool and clean this all up here too and put it back together. Wire brush everything, get it ready for paint. We're going to clean these up and get them all working and clean all of this up. Go cleaner, go.
Yeah, I don't get done cleaning, that's for sure. This guy's loose.
I got my square socket here.
You probably just...
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, it'll come right out. Pretty easy. Here, let me get it.
It's to that point that it doesn't want to ratchet. Yeah. You know what? I put penetrating oil on it from the top, and I think it soaked down in it. Yeah.
That can come too.
Yeah, look at that. That is surprising. The adjusters came out amazingly well, but you can see there where the water was sitting in there that kind of destroyed the threads. We're going to clean them up and chase them. What are you cleaning, cleaner?
We're cleaning these pivot shafts for the track frames here, so I can get it cleaned up and then get the wire brush under here and get things cleaned up and ready for paint.
Yeah, so we're about ready, aren't we?
We're getting there. We're waiting for sandblasting tips so we can really go to town.
Yep. And this has been one of the wettest springs in recent memory here for Colorado. What do you think, Grandpa? Do we know what we're doing?
I doubt it. You're getting along pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, we knew enough of how to get it apart. Yeah. We know that much.
Yeah, this is probably the hard part.
Cleaning it up.
Yep. Well, I ordered some parts for the sandblaster and a couple of extra nozzles because the one I had was broke and it was a little too small. So we've been waiting for that for several weeks. So I was hoping they'd show up. It's really kind of holding up the show because we'd like to get our brake drums sandblasted and kind of cleaned up before we put everything back together in the rear end of the tractor. And while we're waiting, I think it's small enough. I can sandblast these brake bands, and maybe we can get started putting new pads on these, get them cleaned up. I'd like to put a coat of paint on them just so that they'll keep from rusting. While we're waiting, I'm going to take these brakes apart and clean up these brake bands, put a coat of paint on them. We're going to put the new brake pads in here and get those all ready to go. And right now I'm just punching this pin out of here so that I can have a little bit more room to work without that apparatus flopping around. And my little mini cabinet sandblaster, this is probably just too big of a job for it. I can't seem to make any headway with it. I'm just going to wire brush it. Sorry I gotta yell, but while Dad's on the needle scaler, I'm going to clean up these brake parts and the brake bands and get those shined up so we can get a coat of paint on them. Maybe put the pads on them. And Dad spent about, well, the better part of a day underneath of here with a needle scaler and solvent and brush, cleaning up the underside of this thing. Still not done. And he's still not happy with it, but it looks better than it did. And Dad just put a coat of paint on here. Not cosmetic, purely preventative. So the cleaner's been busy out here, like super busy. And these are the bolts that are the adjusters underneath the D4 to adjust the brakes, and you can kind of see how that one's a little bit pitted and messed up. I'm wondering if we ought to make two of them, but this one was just beyond repair. Fortunately, I think the threads in the casting in the machine are fine, but we needed to make another one of these, so I found some grade 8 bolts, and Dad actually made a new adjuster. The cleaner has spent about 8 hours on this thing today. Underneath, on the top, taping things off. And tomorrow, it's ready to just get wiped down and have a fresh coat of primer and some paint put on it. Even the underneath looks really good. Dad's working on the sprockets. We're going to get the inside cleaned up, tape this off, and then get them outside so we can sandblast them. The good news today, we got new nozzles for the sandblaster so I can get started on all this.
Yeah, that's doing fine. The main thing is get in these grooves.
Yeah.
Don't worry about this out here so much.
All right. I'm letting the compressor rest a little bit. We're going to do this intermittently throughout the day so that I don't get my compressor too hot. But this is going through a lot of media. And this is a 1/4 inch size stuff, and the nozzle's 1/4 inch, so it goes really quick and I got to work really fast. We are coming along fairly well. It took us about 2 hours or 3 hours to finally figure out exactly what was wrong with our sandblaster. It wasn't the tip. It did help that I got the bigger tip, but I was using the bigger media that shouldn't be a problem with that size tip, but you get one piece in there that's too big and all bets are off. It plugs right up. So we switched to smaller media and I've had a lot better results and it's working fine. I'm gonna let my compressor rest for a few minutes. This is sprocket 2B8191, I think it is. But it's kind of interesting to note just exactly how much slag was on here and how imperfect this casting was and how they just kind of threw paint on it and ran with it. There.
When we get the other one on, we'll slide it out.
Thank you, Minnesota crew. This stuff is amazing. 1919 root beer from Minnesota. Yeah, this is just a slag that was from the casting. Look, it comes right off.
Here's some more.
Yeah.
Guy wants to chip it all off, but they didn't do it in 1939. See there?
Yeah. That's all that was, just slag. They just chipped it off as best they could and threw some paint on it.
Stayed there for 84 years.
Yeah. I'm really happy with how these turned out. So this is all we're going to do is sandblasting for today. I need to let my compressor rest. The rest of these handles I'm going to get cleaned up on the wire wheel on the bench grinder. And Dad is over here taping off the center of the sprocket so that we can get it out there and get it painted. I've got one of the steering clutches in here in the vise, and right here you can see there used to be a stop so that when these levers sprang back they didn't hit metal to metal. This one's pretty dilapidated, and it was that way before I sandblasted it, but I'm going to see if I can drill it out and come up with an idea to put back in here. I realize this is going backwards, but this is a left-handed drill bit, and the thought process behind that was that maybe that this is threaded in here somehow. I don't really know. Well, that pretty much did it in. I ended up getting that dug out of there, and it looked like whatever material that was, it looked like a cloth with a thread impregnated cloth, similar to like a belt that goes on the belt pulley. And my thought is, I have these silicone plugs here. I might just throw some JB Weld in there and then just stick that in there. I don't know. I'm going to think about this a little bit. This one's the one that's in a lot better shape, but I'm going to go ahead and take it out anyway so I can have them both the same. This one actually pried out rather easily, just like a slug. So, not much to it. We'll get this cleaned up and we can get some paint on it. We've got our table set up over here, and so we can mix our paint and our primer and get that first coat of that primer on there. It needs to cure about 12 hours before we can put some color on them. Over here we have the pieces that we've gotten prepped. I'm going to wipe them down one last time, clean them, make sure they're good. A lot of steering clutch components. Our levers. Over here, the sprockets. Both of the sprockets we're going to paint front and back. They're going to need a little touch-up, we know that. And we're going to need to do a little touch-up anyway after we press them on because of the tool that we're planning to use. And we're going to put a little paint on the ends of the steering clutches just for good measure to keep it from rusting and preserve them a little bit. But the heart of the project is going to be the carcass. So I need to get up in there, get it wiped down underneath, and we're going to start on the bottom and then work our way around the sides.
Goop on the bottom, look. We're going to have to stir that quite a bit. There's quite a bit on the bottom.
This is Ag Specialty Tallman's Dark Gray Primer 04051. And we got a lot of mixing to do to get this right. We had a little bit of a discussion whether we were going to paint this stuff inside or outside, and I'm glad we decided to do it inside because although this isn't a huge rain, it's just enough rain and wind it would have made it a mess. We still have paint left. How much did we use?
Oh, maybe
550.
Probably a good pint, maybe 3 pints.
3 pints of paint.
Not quite a quart.
Okay.
Something like that.
Well, we're doing good with paint. We realized that the problem with putting these sprockets on before we paint was that we couldn't paint the inside of the sprockets. Now, they were never painted well from the factory. At least this way we can touch up what we need to after we press them back on. It'll also give us a good opportunity to spray yellow on here and get this nice and coated. We got a good coat of primer on everything and it's cured overnight. So today we're going to mix up some yellow paint. It's the highway yellow paint. And I think this is going to turn out really nice. We were really happy with the coverage on the primer. So it's been about 12, 13, 14 hours. And it should adhere really nice to this base coat of primer. Just opened up this can of paint. It is a Caterpillar Highway Yellow CML 3011-1. Again, it's the Tallman's Ag Specialty Coatings. And that is very yellow. It actually looks more yellow on the camera. It's more of an orangish yellow off the camera. We're going to stir this up and mix up a batch. Well, we might have got this a little thin. We just did a test spray. So we're going to put a little bit more paint in it. Yeah, this is definitely going to take a second coat. Should turn out pretty good with a second coat.
Yeah.
We got a few runs over here. I got really too close and made a mess. We'll fix that.
Well, when we get to doing the fenders and hood and all that, we'll be a lot better at it.
Yeah. Much better. Okay. That's going to about do it for this coat of paint. We got one more to do. And this is the worst of our paint right here. Dad was just commenting that when he brushed these final drives and we cleaned them up, they had the same kind of run right there. So yeah, that's what I was trying to replicate right here. I wanted it to look like factory, so yeah, that's exactly what that is, sure. It had nothing to do with the fact that I got a little too close with the paint gun and got a little bit liberal with it. The cleaner spent a lot of time putting the final coat on these parts. They're still going to need a little touch-up, maybe one more thin coat. A lot of these are internal parts, and they're good enough for where they're going. The real prize of the day is going to be the second coat is done on old Lefty here. And we need to do a little bit more. We got a few places. It's a little thin. The primer's kind of showing through. But we figured out after the first coat that we had thinned it too much. This stuff can pretty much get painted straight out of the can. And we had a bit of a panic attack. Dad was a little worried for a bit that we had used the wrong color of paint. It looked very, very, very bright after the first coat. But after the second coat, it's got that more orange to it. It's starting to look perfect. Over here are the sprockets. And that is where the steering clutch levers engage. There's bearings that go in there. That won't be seen. That's underneath. Just put a little yellow on there to prevent it from rusting again. And we didn't get too carried away inside these sprocket teeth. They're going to get worn out anyway, but we went ahead and put a little bit on there for good measure. And down there, you can still see the runs. They're a little bit tacky yet, but they're not terrible. And I wasn't kidding, they really did have runs there from the factory when this thing was put together. There must be just something geometrically with that shape that wants to funnel all that paint right down in there into the bottom so that it runs. Especially when we had it too thin. But there you have it, the first fresh paint on Lil Lefty. We're getting really excited. We're ready to put stuff back together. We're working on the brake bands next. And I do want to thank you for watching. Please do like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one.